What's going on, everybody? If I look a little bit sad today, if I look depressed, it's because I go back to work today. School starts this week. The summer is over. It was the fastest 10 weeks of my life. It was a faster 10 weeks than last year's 10 weeks. But here we are. So, the next couple of weeks, be patient with me. Be patient with me. If things are a little jumbled or I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. The first 2 weeks are always really tough for teachers. So, but hey, I'm back at it today and we're off and running. Now, a couple of things to note. First, Wednesday will be Q&A day. Friday, I'm going to do a couple of things. On Friday, I will show my pickups from July. I did have pickups besides just national pickups. I'll show my national pickup that I had in July, and then I'll also show the other pickups I had in July. I bought a few things, got on a nostalgia kick again. I got on a nostalgia kick again in July, and I picked up some stuff I'm really excited about to add to the collection. Friday, in addition to that, I probably had the most eye-opening moment in regards to PSA that I've ever had at the National. And what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to, play Darth Vader music as I show the lines at PSA again. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you the eye-opening moment that I had. There was a moment, and I went, oh my gosh, oh my goodness. And light bulbs went off, and fireworks went off, and I came to a realization. So Friday, I will show my pickups from July. I will open up submissions for the Midlife Community Show and Tell for the month of July. And I will share my realization, and I will go into detail as to why I think it's so important, why it was such a realization, and why it was just sort of like you're always searching for an explanation or an answer or real evidence to a gut feeling that you have. It happened. I will share that on Friday. And I'm looking forward to getting on the computer, looking into the monitor or the camera, I guess it'd be the camera, and just showing you some things and giving you my thoughts on it. That should be a fun one. So Friday, I'm looking forward to that one. I probably won't, I don't know if I'll have something over Saturday or Sunday. It depends on how this week goes. But I have another announcement. This is a big deal. Monday, 1 week from today, 1 week from today is going to be Midlife Live number 8. I set a goal at the beginning of the year, and I said this year, in 2025, I will host one live stream per month. And the August live stream will be 1 week from today. Now, does that mean that I'll be back at work, my hair will be on fire, and I'm going to do a live stream? Yes, that's exactly what it means. My panel is set. On Friday's episode, I will also be unveiling the panel for Friday's Midlife Live number 8. And I can promise you this. I can promise you you're going to like the panel. That will also come out on Friday. So here I am talking, blabbing, but what we are here for today is to talk about my question from last week. And my question from last week was, what are your takeaways from the National? Now, when I issued that question, no national videos had come out yet. No people had seen any stuff from the National. Nobody had attended the National. It wasn't until Wednesday that the National started, from the time that I asked the question again. So here we are. And you guys had a lot of things that you noticed. Now, why does this matter? Come on, Greg. Who cares? Who cares about our takeaways from the National? I really think that if you look at the National, which is the epicenter, it is the absolute center of the hobby. For 1 week, not everyone, a lot of people converge. And if you pay close attention to what's happening, you can notice things. And if you notice them, you could be ahead of the curve on what's coming. Now, 2 years ago, I was not at the National. Last year I was. The year before, I was not at the National. And I watched a lot of content, and I paid close attention. And I want to give you just a glimpse of the video that I posted of my takeaways from the National that I wasn't at. And this was 2 years ago. And I want to see if you think that what I noticed, what my takeaways were, if they've come to fruition. Let's take a quick look. Over 2 years ago, so this was about 2 years and 2 weeks ago, that this video posted right here. Just a couple of little sections of it for you. Check this out, and you'll see why it's so important to pay attention to what's happening at the National. All of that vintage content from the National.
So the first thing is autographs on vintage cards.
So I really feel like a very common theme that people were chasing were vintage cards that were autographed by the player. That was not a thing for years and years and years. You left cards unautographed. In fact, it would devalue the card, but I saw many, many times over the course of my hours of YouTube viewing, people chasing autographed vintage cards, which I get, they're cool. They're rare. And some people have been doing it for a long time, and some people have just started increasing their interest in it over the last couple of years. But that theme seemed to come up a lot, and I have to wonder, is that a result of the chase cards and modern cards being the autographed ones?
So one of the biggest channels in the hobby is Sports Card Investor. And Jeff Wilson here is negotiating a deal on the first day of the National to buy a 41 Joe DiMaggio that's autographed. And he's going back and forth, and he's consulting other people, and he ends up buying it for $22,000. And it's a sweet card, but there can't be many of those out there. The next one is a collector's dream, Orlando. Everybody loves Orlando. He's such a great guy. And he bought an Orlando Cepeda rookie that's autographed with the inscription Baby Bull, which is Orlando Cepeda's nickname. And, you know, Orlando has an awesome collection of vintage stuff. And I know he collects a lot of autographs. And a lot of those autographs are on different pictures and things, but this was a cool pickup on a card. Then I got Mike Moynihan, baseball collector, really well-known channel, really well-known person in the hobby. And Mike is going through, bought a ton of vintage cards signed by Hall of Famers. And I mean, he has a whole stack here of Hall of Fame autographs on vintage cards. The next thing is ultra rare buying.
So the other thing is, it seems like there has been a surge in interest for some of those ultra rare cards. Now, for years and years and years, it was about the Topps and the Bowmans and the Gaudis and the tobacco cards. It was about the mainstream cards, but it seems to me like there's been a surge, like there's been a big increase in some of those ultra rare, kind of, some people call them oddball cards, regional cards, cards that were not widely produced, which is interesting. And is it a result of the low pop, low serial numbered cards of modern collecting? Maybe, maybe not. But it does seem to me, at least, like those ultra rare cards have seen an increase in interest from the average, regular, run-of-the-mill collector like me.
So a card I saw featured a few times in videos was this 68 Clemente 3D card. And when you look at the pop report on PSA, there are not very many of them. It is a rare card. And here's a video of Theo from Clemente Collector. And again, if you're not following Theo, I'd encourage you to do that. But he's taken us through the process of his friend buying one of these 68 Roberto Clemente 3D cards. And the deal's a $50,000 deal. And he ends up doing a trade where he gives up a Babe Ruth, the 53 mantle, and quite a bit of money in order to get the card. And here he is showing off his new pickup.
That was 2 years ago. 2 years ago, watching intently on the content that was coming out, I said, autographed vintage cards. Basically, not modern. Autographed cards that aren't modern seem to be igniting. What have the prices done of Joe DiMaggio Playing Days autograph cards, or Jackie Robinson, or Roberto Clemente, or Mickey Mantle? What have those done over the last 2 years? You could make the argument that that category has gone up as much as any. The other thing I noticed, again, was that oddball cards, non-mainstream cards, we're starting to kind of catch fire. And my argument was, it's kind of like the modern card refractors. It's like it's the same year, they're the same players, but they're the ones that are rarer, they're more scarce. And those sets, the Red Hearts, the Dandies, from the 50s and 60s, some of those sets have gone up as much as anything. I really think if we pay close attention to what's happening at the National, we can have a pretty good idea of what lies ahead for the hobby. Let's take a look at some of your responses of what all of you noticed in your either experience at the National or watching hobby content from it.
Some people said the vintage prices were high. This first one says, I was not at the National. After watching many National videos, my takeaway is dealers are asking absurd prices for the older vintage cards, meaning 50s and older. Someone must be paying these prices. I have been priced out of the hobby. Maybe it's for the best. I'm a retired collector living on a budget. Love your channel. This next one says, I got to hang out with buddies at the National. That was the best part. I met you, Mike Petty, and Coach. I was the one in the Legends Wrestling Legos shirt. My biggest takeaway was the high prices on vintage. Thanks for the great videos, Greg. And this one says, my takeaway from all the content on the show is that Beckett's booth was dead, SGC's booth was dead. Was CGC at the show? The other thing everyone was talking about was repack this and repack that. Are all these high and rising prices getting artificially inflated by repacks? This probably doesn't affect the vintage section as much, but it's all linked together. This next one says, hey Greg, I hadn't commented in a while, but thanks for the awesome video. I didn't attend the National this year, but I think I got a lot from your videos and other people's discussions. It appears that a lot of the in-person prices were very high, with some saying that they were even higher than eBay prices. That's a little surprising to me. Despite missing the National, I was able to buy a Grail card off a Facebook group for a lot cheaper than eBay prices, and maybe even National prices. Maybe that's a new way to go moving forward. Thanks. And finally, this one says, thought-provoking video. Sorry I missed you at the National. I would have enjoyed saying hi. My biggest takeaway was just the overall health of the hobby. Crowds were big and prices were high. And lots of people were still buying anyway. Tons of kids who will become vintage collectors someday. I think the future is bright.
All right, so were prices high? At some dealers, they were high. Some tables had them very high. And the stuff that tended to be high was not common things in low grade. The mid grade, the high grade for whatever it is. You know, a high grade, a 4 is a high grade for some stuff. A 4 is a really high grade for some stuff. But other things where it's fairly common to find a 6, 7, 8, the cards in the 3s and the 4s of those cards that are not particularly rare, those prices to me weren't that high. Some dealers had high prices, but a lot of those dealers that had really high prices had things that are hard to obtain. Cracker Jack cards, prices seemed high. Why? It's hard to get them. It's hard to obtain those cards. So some dealers kind of, it's like when you go to buy a car and at the car dealership, right? If you deal with the online salesperson at the dealership, you email them, hey, I want this car, this color, this model, this trim level. They're going to give you a pretty good price and their margin is going to be fairly thin, but they're going to sell a lot of cars. That guy is going to sell, 25 cars a month. But if you go to the lot, you step on and, you start looking around, the guy comes out, gal comes out, start showing you the car. They're not going to sell as many cars. So what they're going to do, and I know, I'm going to have people say, well, Greg, actually, that's not how it works. You make the same amount. Generally speaking, if you have that guy come out, they're going to try to sell it for more. They're going to sell fewer, but the margin is going to be higher. Some dealers like Ash is constantly he's as busy at the National buying as he is selling. He is buying like crazy. And so stuff is constantly coming in. So you can't go to Ash's booth once, go away, and then never show back up. Look what happened to me. You have to, the big dealers that are doing lots of buying, you have to continue to check in. And some dealers are buying a lot, and some dealers aren't. And one of the reasons why some of them aren't is because maybe they don't pay as much as others. Ash pays strong when he buys, so a lot of people sell to him. But also, if the category that they specialize, if the category that they specialize is hard to obtain, people aren't wanting to get rid of Cracker Jack cards. They are in collections, they're sitting there, they are not high pop counts. So when they get them, they're not that eager to just make a thin margin on them, because it's hard to refill the cases. So the stuff that is harder to obtain, when the sales are fewer and further in between, what happens is they're going to charge a premium. So yeah, if you go to a dealer's case who has all 50s and 60s tops and Bowman stuff, for the most part, what I saw was those prices were pretty fair. The place that the prices were high is the places where it's hard to replace the inventory. There aren't certain cards. If a dealer is dealing with Harringtons and Tharp's cards and Maple Crispet cards and Cracker Jacks, let's just say those are the 4 categories that person kind of specializes in. Those don't walk up at your local show. You don't have somebody show up at your table and go, hey, I've got a Zion case full of this stuff. It's hard to obtain it. So what they have to do is they have to charge a bigger margin in order to make it worth it to get rid of it. Every time I go to a dealer, they talk about how it's difficult to get new quality vintage inventory. I don't blame them for wanting to charge a lot to get rid of it because it's hard to replace it. Anything that's hard to replace is going to have a higher price. But not every dealer was that way. So it depends on the dealer. It depends on, are they a volume dealer? Are they a premium dealer? Do they have a broad variety of cards? Do they have a narrow variety of cards? The guys at the show that were vintage dealers and had a narrow category that they sold, their prices tended to be the highest because it's harder to replace it. But the guys who had a broad inventory where they have everything, football, basketball, baseball, Tim Payne has baseball, basketball, football, hockey, and then a little bit of other stuff. He's got from 1900 to 70, maybe 75 in his cases. His prices weren't crazy. And one of the reasons his prices weren't crazy is because when he goes to try to refill his cases, he sells such a variety of stuff, it's easier to pick it up. I think that makes sense to me. Were prices high for some dealers? Yes. All dealers? No. When I'm making a big purchase, what I want to do is I want to get a good look at that card. I mean, the most expensive card I've ever bought, sight unseen, just pictures, it's probably about $1,000, which is a lot of money. Don't get me wrong, that's a lot of money. But anything over $1,000, and I probably have, I don't know, 7 or 8 cards that are over $1,000. They've always been in person. Because if I'm going to lay out that kind of money, I want to see it in person. So for me, if I'm going to go buy a big card, it's still better to do it at the National, even if you have to pay a little bit more, because the risk is less because you get to see it in person. There's not going to be a surprise when it shows up in the mail. You've got the sales tax issue, you've got the shipping issue and the risk involved in shipping. You got is this transaction going to go smoothly? But when I can be there in person, look at it under different lights, I can put a flashlight on it. I can really look at the surface. I can flip it over. I can get a really good look at it. I can get second opinions. I can look at the actual card. And then I can lay out cash on the table, and then the card is immediately in my hands. That has value. So, even though some dealers charged a little bit more, to me, in a lot of cases, it was still worth it. Not always worth it, but sometimes it's still worth it. Just my take. But yeah, some dealers were really high on their prices, and they probably didn't sell a lot of stuff. And in most cases, those guys probably don't need to sell a lot of stuff. This is what they do as a hobby, and they know how nice their stuff is, and they don't want to give it away. And I don't blame them for not wanting to give away really nice looking cards under comp. I would probably, if I had really nice stuff and I was at a show, I would probably charge a strong amount too. But if I wanted to sell it, I probably would sell it closer to comp price.
Some people mentioned the growth of the community. This first one says, watching content from not going to the National, feel like the vintage community is growing rather quickly was my takeaway. I think you see more people who are staying in this space gravitating to true collector's items. Love it. And my good pal Mookie Chilson says, Greg, watching national videos from afar this year, I had a major takeaway as it relates to the content creator ecosystem. There are lots of social media silos that exist in the hobby content world. Lots of categories of hobby creators, from modern to vintage to non-sport, to news aggregators, to live stream purveyors, to Instagram crossovers, from independent contractors, big and small, to community builders like yourself. I have seen those social media silos slowly eroding over my 5-ish years in Hobbytown. And this year at the National, I got to watch the fish tank from the outside and see great overlap and collaboration between so many of those groups. Great collectors and hobbyists are finding each other on YouTube like never before. And I think it's a great compliment to this platform that this community is diverse and thriving like never before, I think. Chris Hoge and Brent stacking slabs, and 1956 Tops Guy and Jeremy Lee, and Filmington and Leighton and Dr. B are basically members of Midlife Nation and the Misfits and the Four Collectors, though some of them just don't know it yet. We all don't have to do the same thing or collect the same way or collect the same thing to be able to talk about all of the above and laugh and learn. And I saw it happen in real life at the National. Kumbaya. We are the world. That's it. I'm out.
I think Mookie is absolutely right. Now, don't tell him I said that. Don't tell him that I think he absolutely nailed his response, because then his head would be even more inflated. And you know Mookie, that guy is so full of himself. In seriousness, though, he's right. When I started my channel, again, it was almost 3 years ago. Almost exactly 3 years ago, I started my channel. I didn't feel like, and again, this is just maybe my own personal issues, I didn't feel like I was welcome with open arms in the community. I had a couple of people who reached out to me and were very welcoming. Sammy Thunder was very welcoming to me when I started my channel. And Theo Clemente Collector was very welcoming to me when I started my channel. But to be honest with you, I felt like, and again, it's not that somebody said something, just the feeling I got is that some of the other channels looked at each other as like competitors. It was like, why is this channel growing and not that channel? Why have I been doing this for 2 years and that channel's been doing it for a year and a half, but they have more subscribers? There was very much like, it felt competitive to me when I first got in. Doesn't mean it was competitive, but it felt competitive to me. It felt like people were kind of, you stay over there, you stay over there. I've already got my group of buddies, and it made it kind of difficult to get noticed. I feel like a lot of those walls have come down. I feel like East Germany and West Germany have been reunited. The Berlin Wall has fallen, and there is intermingling once again. It definitely feels like that. I felt like, I mean, don't get me wrong, there are friend groups, right? You got, Dustin, Sports Card Dad, his friend group. Neo, great channel, right? Flipping Steve, great channel. Dustin, I really enjoyed Dustin's channel. I think Dustin has a great channel. I listen to it most days. Michael Ham, great channel. Those are 4 good dudes. I like those guys. I met them in person a couple of times at the show. They're good guys. They've kind of got their group. And for a long time, it kind of felt like they kind of just did their thing. And then you got the Misfits, and then you got the 4 Collectors, and then you've got these different groups. And for me, it felt a little segregated for a while. It felt a little bit like you stay in your group and you don't intermingle. But I do absolutely feel like at the National, I had conversations with Dustin, with Neo, with Steve, with Michael Ham. I had conversations and hung out and ate meals with 4 Collectors guys and Misfit guys and all different sorts of groups. It feels like, and then there's the bench clear group. I should have mentioned that one too. And that group. And I feel like it used to just be very isolated, but now, like Mangini was on Sports Card Dad, and Flipping Steve was on Mangini's channel. And people are more like willing to mention each other and show each other and take pictures with each other. And to me, that's a good thing, because I'll tell you what, I don't look at anyone as a competitor. We're not competitors. We're just different items on the menu. And if somebody likes a different item on the menu over me, I don't blame you. There are a lot of people who I think make awesome content and awesome videos. And you should watch what you like, just like you should collect what you like. You should watch what you like. I'm not for everyone. And you know what? Mike, Junkwax Hero, isn't for everyone. And Dan's Vintage Baseball PC, not for everyone. Jake, Wax Pack Wisdom, not for everyone. Tony, Southern Collector, not for everyone. Darren, Return to Collecting, not for everyone. Not everybody is for everyone. We're not competitors. I look at all these people that I just mentioned. I look at them as my friends. And there's never been a time that somebody said, hey, Greg, will you come on? Hey, Greg, what do you think about this? Hey, Greg, what do you think about this thumbnail? Hey, Greg, what do you think about this for my channel? That I've not been honored to give my opinion to help. I don't think people are competitors. I look at us as a bunch of people who like the same stuff. And I am very confident that there are people who make videos that like me, and I think there are people who make videos who don't. And that's totally cool. But I can and I am being dead serious when I say this. There's nobody in the YouTube sports card community, nobody that I dislike. If anybody wanted to have me on and I'm available, I would be happy and honored to do it. I totally agree with you, Mook. I totally feel like there was more intermingling than ever before. When I grew up in Vacaville, California, we have two high schools in town. Well, we had two high schools in town. We had Vacaville High School and we had Wilsey Wood High School. We were arch rivals. Kids from Vaca High did not go to Wilsey Wood parties. Wilsey Wood kids did not go to Vaca High parties. We did not intermingle. We were sworn enemies that stayed on our own side of the highway. Literally, it was the highway divided the town, divided the high schools. And then we all grew up. And when we all grew up, we said, there's actually people over there that are pretty cool. And we started hanging out. And I feel like more than ever, there's more intermingling. I totally agree with you, Mookie. I totally felt welcome by more groups from what used to be different silos than ever before. And I think that is a really good thing because we're actually all on the same team. And it's one of the reasons I never bash other channels. The club sandwich on the menu or the cheeseburger on the menu, they're both great options. And they don't have to hate each other because I love both of them.
Some were comparing the National versus Fanatics Fest. This first one says, my biggest takeaway from attending the National, I feel Fanatics Fest will overtake the National as a better entrance into a hobby as a convention event. I attended both the 2024 and 2025 Fanatics Fest events. The improvements made within 1 year was extremely impressive. The last national I attended prior to this was back in the mid-2000s. Don't get me wrong, there have been improvements to the national, but the improvements to Fanatics Fest were exponentially better and clearly listened to feedback. For a seasoned card collector, modern, vintage, repackers, breakers, LCS, vendors, etc., the national is a dream event, but I can see it as incredibly overwhelming for someone new. Fanatics Fest is organized and already has a backbone to educate new entrants with the forums and audience they have. Love or hate Fanatics, I think Fanatics Fest will be vital to keep the hobby alive, while the National is to the upkeep or maintenance that fuels all collectors. If someone new to the hobby asks me, I can only attend one with my budget. Which should I go to? My recommendation would be Fanatics Fest. This next one says, narrowing it down to only one takeaway is tough, as there are several I think are worth noting. The one I'll go with here is that I feel like the National is trying to keep pace with Fanatics Fest. I haven't been, nor do I intend to go, to Fanatics Fest, but based on social media reaction, it seemed that this year's edition was a hit with its target audience. The National seemed to take note as I saw a lot more interactive sports activities, gimmicky events, a loud carnival barker type than last year. That's not really my thing, but I'm also a huge proponent of just ignoring parts of the hobby you don't enjoy. The National still has plenty of cards, tables, and dealers that appeal to me. My concern is that, as time goes on, the National will try so hard to not lose the younger, modern collecting audience to Fanatics Fest that they perhaps have less of the things that are focused towards us vintage collectors. Maybe I'm being a bit paranoid, but it is definitely something that stood out to me this year.
I definitely felt that this year at the National, there were more bright lights, video screens, attention-grabbing things, attempts to get crowds around different corporate booths, way more than last year. Last year, don't get me wrong, Fanatics, Topps, they had a big booth. eBay had a big booth. A lot of different companies had big booths last year. But this year, it just felt like there was more interactive, attention-grabbing crowds with people screaming and yelling as cards were revealed, as things were being opened, as appearances were being made. And it did feel like it had a little bit of a flavor of Fanatics Fest. Now, I have no doubt that there is a good percentage of people who attended this year's National that they loved that. They were all about that. That's what they love. But there's also a group of people who I lost my voice at the National. Not because I was screaming at the eBay booth, because I was trying to talk over the noise. I would go up to the VIP booth, which is supposed to be this break area to just relax, and there was music like it was a rock concert. I'm like, I would be totally cool if you just put on some mellow James Taylor or something right now, because I'm coming up here to relax and my head is banging from the rock concert. I think that there is definitely something to be said for the National having some influence from Fanatics Fest. There are some people that excites them. There are others that it doesn't. I know that they're never going to separate the categories. They're never going to say vintage dealers in this wing, modern dealers in this wing, and corporate booths in that wing. They're not going to do that ever. And there's a few reasons why they're not going to do that. Number one, the way the National has always done it is the most tenured booth gets first pick on where they want to be. I suppose they could say, well, this is the vintage room, so what booth do you want in the vintage room? But I don't know. I don't think that's going to happen. The other reason I don't think they'll ever do it is it's like the supermarket. On one side of the store, you have the bread. On another side of the store, you have the meat. On another side of the back of the store, you have the dairy. You have the drinks in the middle of the store. The reason that they lay out a grocery store, the way that they lay out a grocery store, is to make sure that you cover as much distance in the grocery store as possible. It would be really convenient if the eggs and the hamburger and the milk were all in the same place, and the bread were all in the same place. I could just go in that little area, get the frequent things that I need, and get out of there. They don't want that. What they want me to do is they want me to cover as much of the store as possible by having to cross it and walk through the whole thing, because then I'm more likely to see something else that I need. And then I'm going to buy more stuff. It is like scientifically done. Literally. They study this stuff. It's on purpose. There are people whose job is to lay out grocery stores to maximize sales. That's what they want at the National. If all of the vintage dealers were on one side and the modern dealers were on another side and the corporate booths were on another side, I would never have to walk by the corporate booths. And you know what? I wouldn't even walk by them. And that would be good for me. But it wouldn't be good for sales. And what the corporate companies want, if they're going to pay all this money, and I don't blame them, if you're going to pay all this money to set up a corporate booth, I have a feeling that what you want is as many people to pass by as possible. And if they had the corporate booths in the same area, there are a lot of people who would never walk over there. But by having them between all of the different dealers, I have to walk by them. I have to. And that's what they want. And I don't blame them for that. But for a convenience for me, it's not ideal. It's not ideal at all for me. But it is ideal for the corporations who are spending big bucks. I don't even remember what was the category here. I'm all over the place. What was it? National and Fanatics Fest. So yeah, oh man, good. See, I don't take notes, guys. This is just what you see is what you get. And anybody who met me in person, I'd be interested in your take. If you met me at the National for the first time, down below in the comments, how am I in person compared to the guy you see on the camera? Am I different than you expected? Am I the same guy in person? I'd be curious on that. Okay, the National versus Fanatics Fest. Yeah, I definitely think Fanatics Fest is affecting the National. And they're affecting the National way more than the National is affecting Fanatics Fest. That's not necessarily a good thing for the National. What I think the National should do, now, I'm not on their board. Nobody cares what I think. Nobody asks me any questions. I actually think I would be a fairly good consultant for a lot of these companies. SGC, PSA, Card Ladder, VCP, Market Movers, the National, different card shows. I think I'd be a pretty good consultant. I think I have decent ideas, but I think we probably all think that. I think the National needs to take a long look in the mirror over the next month. And I think they need to say, what are we? What is our mission? That's why companies have mission statements. It seems cheesy to have a mission statement. But what a mission statement does is you should always refer back to that and go, what are we actually trying to achieve? And I think that the National has to look back at their mission statement and go, what is our ultimate goal? Is it to be the best card show? Is it to be the most fun sporting card event? Is it the place to have the best autographs? Is it the place to have the most variety? Is it the place to have intermingling between modern and vintage and baseball and basketball and football and non-sport? What is the ultimate goal of the event? And then once they really lock that down again and go, yep, that is our North Star. That is our reference point. Then they need to say, are some of the corporate booths, are some of the things that we have, are some of the things that we're doing or not doing or allowing or not allowing in line with our goal? Maybe everything they're doing is in line with their goal. But I think right at the moment, it feels like the National is starting to struggle a little bit with their identity. And I think that that's the underlying point that you're making, that a couple of you are making here. What is the National's identity? Have they lost sight of it because of Fanatics Fest? Are you considering Fanatics Fest as a competitor or as a complementary event? I think that that's a really interesting question, and it'll be interesting to see moving forward what direction the National continues to go.
There were also some other observations as well. This first one says, "Hey Greg, congratulations on your pickups. Awesome, and can't wait to see a video of your pirate set. As a fellow collector, I'm proud of you staying with it and completing a set from the 1800s. I've watched many of the National videos. My biggest takeaway was corporate takeover in general. Whether it was PSA crowds or the casino setup with breakers or other corporate booths, Walmart was even advertising, for God's sake. I would dread the day if they start to push actual dealers out or cramp them up in a small area to make room for whatever new comes up in the future." And my dad adds, "My takeaway from the National is it seemed to me that centered cards, regardless of the grade, were getting snapped up. Since my emphasis has been to get away somewhat from razor-sharp corners and razor-sharp edges and focus on the well-centered cards, that by the third day, those cards were few and far between. It's good because my collection is primarily well-centered cards, but making adding to the collection more difficult."
All right, a couple more comments here. First, let's start with Don's about the corporate takeover. It does feel like there's a little bit of a corporate takeover. It does feel like, I don't know. When I was in college, and I've shared this story, it's been a while, but I did an internship down in Los Angeles, in Hollywood, literally in Hollywood, California. I did an internship, and I worked at as an intern in the marketing department. I was a marketing major, and I worked in the marketing department of the Jim Henson Company, the Muppets, Kermit, Miss Piggy, Fozzie, all those guys, right? And one day that we went over to the 3E Expo. And the 3E Expo, or E3, might have been E3. E3? Doesn't matter. Big expo at the Staples Center that is all about electronic gaming. Like it was like the Electronic Entertainment Expo, I think. This, got to remember, guys, this would have been 25 years ago. And when I was there were corporate booths everywhere. Sony PlayStation, Microsoft Xbox, Nintendo, EA Sports. All of these different companies had booths. And they were passing out software, they were passing out handouts, they were giving previews of upcoming things that they were working on, they were doing demos. And it was an informational, there were speakers, but they didn't have people like selling stuff. It wasn't like they had vendors that were people selling video games, vintage video games and vintage consoles. At least they didn't 25 years ago when I was there. It was people who enjoyed video gaming and computer gaming going to the corporate booths to see what they were up to and what they were working on. But then there are things like Comic-Con and video game conventions and vintage toy conventions where vendors sell stuff. Separate things. It feels like, because I've been to a lot of big shows. Again, San Francisco Bay Area Labor Day weekend back in the 80s and 90s had a massive card show, hundreds of tables, hundreds, probably 1,000 tables, I would guess, at these shows every Labor Day weekend for 15 years, maybe longer. There were not a lot of corporate booths. Now, I remember one year Action Packed was there, right when Action Packed came out, and I waited in line, and I got a Jerry Rice Action Packed card, and Jerry Rice was there signing them. And then the next day I stood in line, Roger Craig was there. I stood in line, got an action-packed Roger Craig card signed. But that was kind of unusual. It wasn't heavy in the corporate stuff. It was heavy in the cards and the dealers and to some extent the autographs. But at the National now, it definitely is starting to feel like one of the reasons that there's not a lot of room to move around is because the corporations are starting to take over the card part. I understand that if I'm running the National, I want to make decisions that are best for the bottom line. Even though it's a nonprofit group, they still want revenue to be high. They want it to be thriving. It feels like the corporations are becoming the focus over the dealers and the cards. That, I think, is where things can start to get a little bit worrisome. It's always got to have the collector and it's always got to have the cards as the focus. The auxiliary stuff should be the auxiliary stuff, not the focus. And recently, it has started to feel like the focus is becoming the corporate stuff. I'm not saying we shouldn't have corporate booths. But you know what? Upstairs, there was a lot of empty space. And you could put all the corporate booths upstairs and leave the whole first floor to be the dealers. That would be fine. So why don't they do that? Because that's not what the corporations want. And the corporations write big checks. So I feel what you're saying, Don. I don't see them changing it because I think that the corporations would not want to write checks the size that they're writing if they weren't right in the middle of the action. As far as my dad's comment, my dad said centered stuff went away. Absolutely. There were a lot of cards that I saw. There was a 52 Bowman Stan Musial I saw on day one. That was gorgeous, well-centered. Price was, a little over comp. There was a 51 Bowman Yogi Berra that I saw. Same thing, gorgeously centered. Beautiful eye appeal, a little over comp. After I bought my Cobb and I was trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to do on day 2? The first place I went was to those 2 booths to see on those 2 cards to say, well, maybe with my remaining funds, I'll go for one of those. Both were gone. Both were gone by midday of day 2. And they weren't under comp, but they were gorgeous. And I do feel like a lot of the gorgeous stuff was getting gobbled up quick. I definitely agree with that. I think you guys had some great observations. You had some great points. I thought that this was really interesting to see the different perspectives. It's definitely interesting to me that by far the most common response was about the high prices on vintage. Now, there were other comments. I can't put in every comment, but other people brought up some good points about why does it seem like I didn't see a lot of vintage football? Is it because I just watched videos and those people are interested in baseball, or was there not? There were a lot of great comments. But again, this video is going to be pushing an hour just with the ones that I used. And part of that I know is my fault. I know. But that's just, it is what it is. Now, this coming week, I have a question, but the question is based on a comment to this week's question. So what I want to do is I want to read for you the comment that was made to this week's question, and then I want to come back and I want to look at what my question for all of you is for next week.
Here's a comment in question for this coming week. So this was a response to this week, but I thought it was worthy of next week's full discussion. It says, first, it was nice to meet you in person at the National, Greg. Secondly, we're paying way too much for these cards now than we have since the 70s and mid-80s. And I can't tell you just how uncomfortable I was walking around alone in a city like Chicago. The prices we're paying now prior to the pandemic is absolutely insane. And for cards that really aren't that rare. T206, 1933 Gaudy, and most Bowman and Topps issues aren't rare. I'm not worried about the long-term value of my collection because for a disabled guy like me, waking up in the morning, having an extra day of life is more important. Just ask Orlando from A Collector's Dream. I'm sure he'll tell you as well. And for the record, the highlight of the National wasn't the cards, but getting together with Orlando and Michael Golden, Dustin, and John Mangini, and others. People are paying too much for cards now. And where are the majority of collectors getting the money to pay for them? It's a longer discussion I won't get into here, but at some point the hobby needs to ask some really tough questions. I completely understand that we all want our cards to go up in value because we pay a lot for them. But at the same time, you have to go into it with the understanding, like the stock market, that prices go down and you may put in a lot more than you ever get out financially in the long run. And that's where understanding hobby history really helps. Everything you're saying now, we've already been here before. The only thing different is the technology. In fact, Aldous Huxley said it best, that men do not learn very much from the lessons of history is the most important of all the lessons that history has to teach. Putting that aside, most companies since the 1970s only last about 20 years. And so are we concerned about the grading company or the card inside the holder? If you're old enough to remember the early days of grading, we all already had the tools necessary to grade cards ourselves until Collector's Universe had to go into grading cards. The first being the Gretzky McNall Wagner in 1991, because Collector's Universe was involved in a massive scandal in the coin hobby, and the dealers and collectors in the 1990s didn't trust grading or even know how to price or sell graded cards. It was a gimmick through fraud.
All right. There were a lot of meat and potatoes in that comment, right? A lot of meat and potatoes. You know, meeting people was better than the cards. The card prices seemed really high. They've gotten out of control. They're way higher than they were pre-COVID. They've never really come all the way back down. This is unsustainable. When you start using literary Huxley references, then we know we're really getting deep with this. But you're right. You're right that looking back at history can help us to determine the future. We don't have U.S. and world history as a requirement in every school in the country just for fun. There are several reasons for it, but one of the reasons is because we can look at history to try to make decisions about what's ahead of us. And if we know that in the past, when certain things have happened, there have been certain results, we can either choose to try something different or do that again because the results were positive. And not using history as sort of at least a guide for what to do in the future is kind of a big mistake. Now, cards have had different periods where they've gone way up and they've gone way down. And it wasn't just during COVID where that happened. There have been spikes and there have been crashes for multiple times that I've been in the hobby. And even though I look old, I'm only 46. So I guess what I'm saying is that definitely we should be considering what is to come based on what has happened leading up to this. Now, I have some opinions and I don't want to taint the jury pool too much. So I'm just going to kind of leave it at that. But ultimately, the question that I have from that question, the piece of that question or that statement or that comment that I want to pull out and ask you is, have card prices gotten out of control? Are prices for cards completely out of control at this point? And what will the ramifications be as a result? I think that that's a really interesting topic. Have card prices gotten out of control? Let me know your thoughts down below. I look forward to sharing your thoughts next week on Monday. And remember, before you do anything, mark your calendar. Next Monday, Midlife Live number 8.